Night was falling heavily on the regional hospital in Cedar Falls, Iowa, when the automatic emergency room doors slammed shut with a metallic clang. A woman stumbled in, clutching her right side with a trembling hand while the other braced against the white-tiled wall. Her face was pale, covered in a thin layer of cold sweat that glistened under the merciless fluorescent lights of the hallway. She wore faded jeans and a simple gray cotton t-shirt, ordinary clothes that revealed absolutely nothing about who she really was. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with glasses hanging from a gold chain around her neck, glanced briefly over the computer screen before returning her attention to the form she was filling out. There was no urgency in her movements, just the mechanical routine of someone who had seen thousands of patients pass through those doors over the years. "Full name and insurance card number," he said without looking up again. The woman took a deep breath, each breath seeming to require considerable effort. "Sarah Mitchell, I need to see a doctor immediately. The pain is getting worse. Everyone needs to see a doctor, ma'am. I'll need your documents, and you'll have to wait your turn. We have several people ahead of us." Sarah held out her wallet with trembling fingers, almost dropping it on the high counter. The receptionist took the insurance card, typed the information with deliberate slowness, and then pointed to the crowded waiting room. "Sit there. We'll call you when it's your turn." The waiting room was a depressing portrait of suburban America on a Thursday night. Orange plastic chairs were arranged in stiff rows. An old television broadcast local news at a low volume, and about 15 people were in various states of discomfort. A child cried in its mother's lap. An elderly man coughed alarmingly in a corner, and a teenager held an ice pack against his swollen ankle. Sarah found a seat near the wall and let herself fall, heavily, leaning to the side in an attempt to relieve the mounting pressure in her abdomen. Each wave of pain that coursed through her was more intense than the last, as if something were breaking inside. She had known pain before, had endured things that would break ordinary people, but this was different. There was a sharp, insistent quality to this pain that told her something was seriously wrong. An hour passed, then 2. Sarah watched as other people were called in, some who had arrived after her. A man with a cut on his hand, a woman with a fever. Even the teenager with the ankle injury was taken inside before her. She tried to get the receptionist's attention twice, but was met with the same indifferent look and the same rehearsed response about waiting her turn. By the 3rd hour, the pain had become almost unbearable. Sarah doubled over, trying to breathe through the increasingly intense waves coursing through her. She knew what discipline was. She knew how to control her breathing, how to compartmentalize discomfort. But her body was beginning to betray her training. Sweat soaked her shirt, and her hands trembled uncontrollably. A young nurse walked past her carrying a clipboard, and Sarah managed to raise her hand. "Please, I really need help. The pain is..." He looked at her with an expression that mixed boredom and slight irritation. "Have you been triaged yet?" "No, I've been waiting for 3 hours." "Well, when it's your turn, we'll do the screening. Until then, you need to wait like everyone else." He didn't even slow down, simply continuing to walk down the hallway, as if she were just another minor obstacle in his path. Sarah closed her eyes and rested her head against the cold wall. She thought of all the times she had cared for wounded people in far worse conditions than these. Tents in Afghanistan where the temperature exceeded 40 degrees. Helicopters vibrating violently as she tried to stabilize soldiers with catastrophic injuries. Forward bases where medical supplies were scarce, and decisions had to be made in fractions of a second. And now here she was, in a modern hospital with every imaginable resource, being treated as if she were an inconvenience. Irony was not lost on her. By the 4th hour, something had changed. The pain reached a new peak, and Sarah felt something warm and wet spreading beneath her shirt. When she looked down, she saw blood beginning to stain the gray fabric, a dark bloom slowly expanding. Her medical training, years of experience in trauma situations, immediately cataloged what this meant. Internal bleeding, possibly an organ rupture. She was running out of time. With great effort, she stood and staggered to the reception desk. The same woman was still there, now eating a sandwich while typing with one hand. Sarah leaned heavily on the counter, leaving a trail of blood in her wake. "I'm bleeding internally," Sarah said, her voice firmer than she expected despite the pain. "I need immediate surgery or I'll go into hypovolemic shock." The receptionist finally looked up, her eyes widening slightly at the sight of the blood. But instead of acting urgently, she frowned. "Ma'am, you can't self-diagnose. When it's your turn, there won't be a next time if I'm not helped now." Sarah tried to keep her voice calm, but she could feel the world beginning to tilt at its edges. "Please, I know what I'm talking about. Everyone thinks they know." The receptionist sighed and picked up the internal phone with maddening slowness. "Let me see if I can speed up your triage." But before she could dial, a distinctive sound cut through the air, the deep rhythmic hum of helicopter rotors growing in intensity. All heads in the waiting room turned toward the windows as the sound grew louder, closer. The fluorescent lights flickered as the helicopter flew low over the hospital. The receptionist frowned, confused. This isn't a regular medical helicopter. Sarah recognized the sound immediately. Her eyes closed for a moment, a complex mixture of relief and embarrassment passing across her face. She knew exactly what kind of helicopter it was, a Black Hawk, and she knew exactly why it was there. The helicopter landed in the hospital parking lot, its rotors creating a whirlwind that made cars sway and debris fly. Through the emergency room windows, everyone could see the imposing black military helicopter, its army markings clearly visible even in the dim nightlight. It wasn't something the people of Cedar Falls, Iowa saw every day. The emergency doors blasted open and 4 soldiers entered in formation, all wearing full combat uniforms. They moved with the precision of a well-trained unit, their eyes scanning the room rapidly before settling on Sarah. The soldier in front, a tall man with Sergeant Major insignia, walked directly toward her. "Colonel Mitchell," he said, his voice carrying the respectful yet urgent tone of someone on a critical mission. "Madam, your medical alert device was activated 4 hours ago. Why the hell haven't you been seen yet?" The silence that fell over the waiting room was absolute. Even the crying child fell silent. Everyone present, patients, receptionist, nurses who had stopped to observe, simply stared at the scene unfolding before them. "Colonel?" the receptionist repeated weakly, her sandwich forgotten in her hand. Sarah tried to straighten up, the instincts of decades of military service fighting against the pain that consumed her. "Sergeant Major Patterson, I said I was waiting my turn. I didn't authorize it. With all due respect, ma'am, when your vital signs drop to critical levels and your location remains static at a medical facility for more than 3 hours, protocol dictates that we come and retrieve you." Patterson gestured, and the other 3 soldiers immediately positioned themselves around Sarah. Medical Dr. Hayes assessed the colonel. One of the soldiers, a woman with the insignia of an Army medical officer, quickly knelt beside Sarah and began a rapid but thorough assessment. Her fingers found Sarah's pulse. Her eyes examined her pupils. Her hands carefully felt her distended abdomen. Pulse of 120 and weak. Pressure probably 80/50 based on perfusion. Abdomen rigid with evidence of internal bleeding. She needs surgery now. The doctor looked up, her eyes meeting Patterson's. "Not in 10 minutes. Now." Patterson turned to the receptionist, his voice sharp as steel. "Where is the surgeon on call?" The woman opened and closed her mouth several times like a fish out of water. He is... Let me call. Don't ask me. Tell me where he is. Now." One of the nurses who had ignored Sarah earlier stepped forward, his face flushed. "Look, you can't just walk in here and... We can, and we will." Patterson didn't raise his voice, but there was a quality about him that clung to no argument. "This is Colonel Sarah Mitchell, Chief Surgeon of the United States Army Medical Command. She served 4 tours in combat zones, operated in conditions that would make her worst days seem like a vacation, and saved more lives than you have in your entire career, and you left her bleeding in a waiting room for 4 hours." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Where's the surgeon?" The nurse paled. "Operating room 3. He's finishing an appendectomy." "How long?" "Maybe 20 minutes. "We don't have 20 minutes." The military doctor was already preparing an IV line, her movements efficient and practiced. "We need to transport her to Walter Reed, or at least to the military hospital in Omaha. Here she'll die waiting." Sarah tried to protest, tried to say she didn't want special treatment, that other patients also needed care, but her voice came out only as a weak whisper. The truth was that she was in mortal danger, and her pride wouldn't change that. Patterson was already on the radio, coordinating with the Black Hawk pilot. "Flight time to Omaha? 52 minutes, Sergeant Major." "She doesn't have 52 minutes. The doctor was inserting the IV line with expert precision, saline bags already being connected. "We need a surgeon here now, or she won't survive the transport." That's when another figure appeared in the hallway. A gray-haired man wearing stained surgical scrubs, still drying his hands with a towel. He stopped abruptly upon seeing the scene. uniformed. Soldiers surrounding a patient. Military medical equipment being deployed in the middle of her waiting room. What the hell is going on here? Patterson turned to him. Are you the surgeon on call? Dr. Richard Brennan, yes. And this is my emergency. So I suggest that you and your soldiers... Dr. Brennan, the military doctor interrupted, her voice professional yet urgent. This patient presents with active internal bleeding, likely splenic or hepatic rupture based on the location and progression of symptoms. She has been in your waiting room for 4 hours while her condition deteriorated. She requires immediate exploratory laparotomy. Brennan glanced at Sarah, seeing for the first time the blood staining her clothes, the deathly pallor of her skin, the tremor that ran through her. Something in his expression changed, his defensive posture giving way to genuine medical concern. 4 hours? How was she triaged? She didn't go, Patterson replied coldly. She was ignored. Brennan closed his eyes for a moment, clearly processing the implications. When he opened them again, he was in full medical mode. Bring her to operating room 2. She's equipped and ready. He looked at the military doctor. Do you have a blood type? O negative in the transport bag. 4 units. Bring them all. We're going to need them. Brennan was already on the move, shouting orders to his team. Anesthesiologist to OR2 immediately. Surgical team complete. Prepare for emergency. Laparotomy. Move. The transformation was instantaneous. The hospital that had treated Sarah with indifference for hours now exploded in urgent activity. Nurses rushed in all directions. Equipment was mobilized. Doors were opened. Soldiers carefully transferred Sarah to a stretcher that appeared, keeping the IV line stable as they ran through the corridors. Sarah caught fragments as she was being transported, fluorescent lights flashing rapidly overhead, urgent voices coordinating, the rhythmic sound of her own heartbeat on the monitor someone had connected. She felt professional hands moving her from the stretcher to the operating table, felt the prick of more IVs being inserted, felt the oxygen mask being placed over her face. Colonel Mitchell, Brennan's voice cut through the fog that was beginning to cloud her consciousness. I'll take care of you. That's a promise. She tried to respond, tried to thank him, but the anesthesia was already pulling her down. Her last conscious vision was of Patterson's face through the operating room window, watching intently, keeping watch as good soldiers always do. The surgery lasted 3 hours and 42 minutes. Brennan found exactly what the military doctor had diagnosed: a splenic rupture with active bleeding that had filled her abdominal cavity with blood. Had he waited another hour, perhaps even 30 minutes, Sarah would have gone into irreversible shock. He removed the damaged spleen, repaired bleeding vessels, irrigated the abdominal cavity, and closed it with the meticulous care of someone who understood the gravity of his initial mistake. When Sarah finally woke up in recovery, the first thing she saw was Patterson sitting in a chair beside her bed, still in uniform, still vigilant. He smiled slightly when her eyes opened. Welcome back, Colonel. His voice came out hoarse. You shouldn't have come. With all due respect, ma'am. Yes, we should. He leaned forward. That alert device you use isn't just for show. When one of ours is in danger, we respond. Always. Sarah looked around the room. It was a standard recovery unit, but she could see through the window that 2 soldiers were positioned outside her door. Did you bring a guard? General Hawthorne insisted. When he learned that one of our best surgeons had been neglected in a civilian emergency, he was displeased. Patterson paused. There are also approximately 37 members of the press in the hospital lobby at this moment. The story of an Army Black Hawk landing in Cedar Falls, Iowa, to rescue a neglected officer has spread rapidly. Sarah groaned, though not entirely from physical pain. I didn't mean to create a situation. You didn't create this, Colonel. They created it when they chose to ignore a patient in crisis. The fact that this patient was you only brought consequences they didn't expect. He stood up. Rest. Dr. Brennan wants to keep you here for a few days for observation. Your team will remain here. In the following days, the story exploded, not just locally, but nationally. The image of the Black Hawk in the hospital parking lot went viral. Investigative reports revealed that Cedar Falls Regional had a history of long wait times and patient complaints. The receptionist and nurse who had ignored Sarah were placed on administrative leave. The hospital faced multiple investigations, but what resonated most with the public was Sarah herself. When reporters finally secured a brief interview, she expressed no anger or resentment. Instead, With the calm dignity of someone who had served in far worse circumstances, she simply said, "I hope this leads to changes that benefit all patients, not just those with military helicopters." Dr. Brennan visited her personally before her discharge, his face marked by something between guilt and admiration. "Colonel Mitchell, I have no words for what happened. You should never have been treated this way." Sarah studied him for a moment. "Dr. Brennan, you saved me when you told me. That's what matters. But only because the army intervened. If they hadn't come, but they came, and now perhaps other patients won't be ignored in the same way." She extended her hand. "Thank you for your surgical skill." He shook her hand, clearly still processing the whole experience. "Where are you going from here?" "Back to work." Sarah smiled slightly. "I have soldiers who depend on me. I always have." When the Black Hawk finally took off, 3 days later, carrying Sarah back to Walter Reed for follow-up care, half the hospital was at the windows watching. The woman they had dismissed as just another problematic patient was actually someone who had dedicated her life to saving others. And perhaps, just perhaps, the way she was treated would change how they treated the next vulnerable patient who walked through their doors.